Call the meeting to order. Please rise for the flag salute. Will the Deputy City Recorder please call roll?
Counselor Mann,
Present.
Counselor Workman,
Here.
Counselor Salvage,
Here.
Counselor Steinhebel,
Here.
Counselor Elfers,
Here.
and Counselor Dykstra.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, just a quick reminder, make sure that your mics are turned on and that you're at least 6 inches to the mic. So it's important that we get all the recordings. So consent calendar, the agenda, city council agenda, June 28, 2023. Is there a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
The motion has been made. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion passes. Let's get into why everybody's here. Okay. Public hearing. Number one, overnight site for people to seek protection from the elements. The public hearing is now open at 5:01. Will the city manager present the staff report?
Certainly, thank you. And I will try to make this not too long, but there's a lot and this is nuanced. So we did have a public hearing on May 10th. This is a follow-up to that discussion. At that time, there were 5 sites that staff had identified with the ad hoc task force as potential sites for an overnight sleeping location. There was a lot of public testimony. Council considered that and took 3 of the sites off the list. Remaining were the corner of Oak and Park Streets, also called the old gas station or the Holiday Station, and the Maple Street side of City Hall as 2 possible sites where people could be located for overnight rest. The council asked staff to go back and do more work, look at additional opportunities, other parcels that we could look at that maybe we had been considering and had not followed through on. And I will note that in addition to 7 city-owned parcels on the list, we do have a private property owner who has identified a parcel that he would be willing to lease to the city if we wished to pursue that as an option where an overnight sleeping location can be based. As backup, let's remind you that we have Ninth Circuit Court decisions and we have state law, most notably House Bill 3115 passed in 2021, that identify that if you do not have shelter sites where people can go who have no other place, then all public property is available for people to sleep, rest, lie down, sit, seek protection from the elements. There was a lot of discussion and a lot of need statewide in all communities to look at their parks ordinances and their public camping ordinances to make sure that they were not citing people sleeping in a park, for example, as a criminal act if they had no place else to go. So we have pursued that. The council has significantly amended Municipal Code Chapter 12.14, which is about parks and includes language about camping, specifically that camping is really only allowed at Gill's Landing, where we have designated campsites that are available for rent. And then created a new Municipal Code 12.14 that talked about a place where people can sleep in public for times that parks are not available. And I should note, the amendment included effective July 1st, parks are open from 7 a.m. until 10 p.m. They have been dusk to dawn. No, they've been open dawn to dusk, but we set hard hours of 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. So beginning July 1st, a person who is sleeping in a park can be identified by a police officer that they need to go elsewhere. And right now, as everything stands, that elsewhere would be any other publicly owned property in the city. Excuse me. So while you think about public property as places like this parcel, City Hall, Justice Center, wastewater treatment plant, parks, you got to remember that public property includes the sidewalks throughout town, the space between the sidewalk and the curb on a street. It includes the streets. It includes right-of-way. It includes riparian areas that have oftentimes been dedicated to the city as non-developable property. It includes the trail system throughout town. All of that is public property. So as things stand today, we have met the requirements of the Ninth Circuit and the requirements of HB 3115 in terms of clarifying the language about when you can sleep in parks, and that is going to be consistently enforced. We have identified where you can sleep, which is other public property. So the question really before you tonight is whether you want to leave that, and that's for all practical purposes what we have today, where people sleep any place they can find a place. Sometimes they are establishing a camp, sometimes they are sleeping just overnight, moving on. One alternative is to identify a designated location that we would be able to provide a porta potty, hand washing, garbage pickup, some kind of enclosure around the space, an agreement with an agency to close that space at some point in the morning and send people away that would be just an overnight sleeping place, not a camp, but a place where people can go and sleep overnight and then move elsewhere during the day. The other option that we have in front of you tonight is identifying time, place, and manner considerations that would narrow the universe of public property that people could sleep by, for example, saying not within 1,000 feet of a school, or not on the sidewalk in front of a residential or commercial property, so that those places become unavailable for people to sleep. Not in the road, not in public right of way, those kinds of things. And that's really going to open up the door then for a half dozen potential locations that would not be excluded based on those time, place, and manner restrictions. So we've identified a total of 8 locations. We remain with the City Hall sidewalk by Maple Street, on Maple Street, the old gas station at Oaken Park. We have a city-owned site on Berlin Road that's south of Grant. It's where the landing used to be for the old bridge. We have a trail property that's on Industrial Road, the terminus of Burdell Boulevard, adjacent to the old Champion Mill site. The Justice Center landscaped area, basically the front lawn on 2nd Street. There's a portion of the courtyard out in front that would meet the time, place, and manner restrictions. And then there is the parcel that Jeff Hetherington has identified that is south of Grant Street, west of Booth, basically behind Servco, between Servco and the railroad tracks there. He would want that to be a lease to the city, and the city would need to secure liability insurance and those kinds of things. But that is a parcel that's been offered that is not public property, but is offered for an overnight sleeping location. I will remind you, and I think it was well said at the last council meeting, there is no place on this list that is a perfect spot, that is particularly even considered a good spot. I think counselors were talking about it being the least worst location, identifying. I will also tell you that the League of Oregon Cities has a news feed, and there are newspaper articles across this state every day about community after community in the same place we are. They have taken a variety of directions. So a couple of cities, for example, have identified the camping location is on the front lawn or a side lawn at City Hall. Some of them have identified a particular park location. Some of them have pursued time, place, and manner restrictions only, and basically said there would be a limit to the number of locations. There are communities that have shelters. There are communities that have campsites where people can establish permanent camps. There are communities with robust social service agencies that provide housing that ranges. So for example, Rogue Retreat in Medford ranges from a tent campsite all the way up to low-income apartments that they help people with. Money is an issue for all of those communities, and trying to come up with what the solution is. I think it's important to recognize that we do not have a shelter operation in Lebanon currently. We do not have any social service providers offering a shelter. I think it's also important to note that even if we had a shelter, unless that shelter has no rules, we would still have to have a place where people would be allowed to sleep overnight who do not wish to follow the rules. Most of the shelters that operate in the state are low barrier and at least have rules. For example, you can't bring in narcotics, you can't bring in weapons, and people who don't wish to follow those rules then cannot participate in that camp facility. And so those cities still have to have a place for those people who don't wish to follow those rules. In the staff report, I laid out kind of some of the challenges with some of the sites. I'm happy to talk about that. I don't know that I need to go through that in depth. I think, frankly, you all know what those sites are, and I think you know on the face what the challenges would be with those sites. And again, none of them is a good location. There is nothing on this list that sings "Pick me, pick me." And I don't have anything else that I can throw out on the table at the present time that would achieve that goal. So the goal for you tonight really is to listen to public testimony. You've gotten a lot of written testimony already, including some comments about some of the sites that I think as staff we were not aware of in terms of some of the concerns. You do have a draft ordinance in the packet that would identify time, place, and manner restrictions. Those can certainly be modified. I have seen communities, for example, peg anywhere from 1,000 feet from schools to 500 is another commonly used term. We have 1,000 in ours. If you wanted to modify that to 500, those kinds of amendments could be offered if you wish to pursue that. There's also a resolution with a blank where if you wanted to name a particular location, that blank could be filled in tonight and you could vote on that. But again, you don't have to identify a particular location if you don't wish to do so. So with that, I'm going to stop and answer any questions that you might have.
Can I ask council, is it, my opinion, this is my opinion, can we eliminate the downtown ones before we even go any farther with that? I don't think anybody wants that. I think a lot of people here are against it. I don't think it's a good idea. It's not good for our town. I don't know if it's proper to say that now, but I would want to eliminate those as a choice.
I agree with you. I would like to eliminate the Maple and the gas station ones, but
Please, let's keep order.
From folks first.
okay.
They're not on the top of my list anymore, so I would probably be okay eliminating them, but
I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't hear the people. I
Oh,
just
I
want to know
agree.
how everybody else feels.
Correct.
I'm just,
Well, that's understandable because we're by law required to be quiet on this until it's a public hearing. So we're not allowed to talk outside of these meetings. So this is where we need to make those or
And
have those questions.
does anybody
and
have
get that
one of them that's
dialogue
sticks out?
going.
I actually have one that stands out as Burdell Boulevard, but the site that stands out to me as the least disruptive that affects the least amount of neighbors is Burdell Boulevard. But I don't know the timeline on future development. Like, would this be a 1-month spot or a 6-month spot, or there's no sure development for sure?
So for example, we have permitted already from the city's perspective, the Dairy Queen, which is going in that area. But they are still working through the ODOT process to get access, and I don't know how long that will take. So I don't know when they would start construction. That will be up to them. So could it be next month? Yes. Could it be 6 months from now? Yes. That's one that's,
Would the construction affect the end of Burdell Boulevard where the proposed
I
site
don't
is?
know if that would, Kelly said no.
That particular site would not necessarily affect Burdell Boulevard. We have had a number of people call with interest for development of those 2 vacant sites adjacent to this street. They are calls of interest. We have done zoning confirmation letters regarding lending agencies, which is a step in a development process, but we haven't had anything come forward as a permit itself for something to occur on those sites. So it is still,
So it's safe to say
a
we're,
lot of the
we're
way.
probably a year from any type of having to move. If we establish a sleeping area at the end of that road, we're probably 9 months to a year minimum of having to move, relocate that spot.
Based off of.
Based
private
on
property
development.
construction.
Yeah, okay.
Gonna kick the can down the road.
Well, at least we have a spot and there's no residential area. It's not downtown. It's,
with that.
it's paved. We can put a porta potty, some road jersey barriers there. That's the one of all the ones on the list, it had the least amount of impact and was out of the way enough, but still not tucked back behind businesses and behind people's houses.
And this will probably get litigated 2 or 3 times by the time that's ready. This will change on us anyway, I would imagine, I'd guess.
Well, that's exactly it. I was just going to say that this issue is going to evolve from this point for the next probably, I would say, 2 years, going through the court system. This is kind of the result of our way of governance through the home rule of how we, cities live under the home rule. So there's, of course, if we were king, we could say, oh, we're doing it this way. Well, we can't because of home rule. So, am I correct on that? To a certain extent. I know on parks we can. If you want to speak on that, it'd probably be
Well,
good.
to a certain extent, the decision from the Ninth Circuit really flies in the face of home rule. It gives us very little home rule because it's telling us what we can do. So the Ninth Circuit has basically said that it violates the U.S. Constitution that everybody needs to abide by if you punish people for the act of being homeless. To the home rule provisions of the Oregon Constitution and law give cities the rights to rule themselves to the extent that they haven't been dictated either by the U.S. Constitution, federal law, or state law. In other words, if they don't touch it, we can do something. So home rule is less and is getting less and less. I mean, it's, because everything from the state to the federal is telling us what we have to do and what we can't do. And so what's left is not a lot.
I also will note as we've gone through this process, the information that we've got, reasonably objective time, place, and manner restrictions means what to who, right? And so I think we do expect that there will be further legal action.
Absolutely.
And
People will put
because
stuff up
the
and-
state and the cities in the state have interpreted and taken different courses of action, it will be interesting to see what the outcome is. And I couldn't tell you today what that will mean in 2 years and 5 years and 10 years.
So, and some people disagree with me, but I mean, I've said, and I'll continue to say, that the state law is really irrelevant. Because what they're saying is that you can put in reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. Well, yeah, that's what the U.S. Constitution says. And ultimately, the Ninth Circuit's going to determine what that means. So, the state could say what they think it is, and the Ninth Circuit could tell the state they're wrong, because it's the U.S. Constitution being interpreted. So ultimately, this is going to go through courts. And ultimately, I was actually looking today for some decisions from other circuits, because I think I've mentioned this. The way to get something in front of the Supreme Court is to have decisions out of separate circuits that are at odds. In other words, conflicting decisions. And then that spurs the Supreme Court to take a case to resolve a disagreement among the circuits, right? There are some cases that are going up in other circuits. Now, they haven't been specifically decided at the highest appellate level, but if they are decided in differently than the Boise case and the Grants Pass case, there is a higher likelihood that the U.S. Supreme Court will accept review and will ultimately hear from the Supreme Court on this. But it's not. The concept that you can't punish people for being homeless is not new. But the definition of that is, what does it mean to punish somebody from homeless? I mean, I understand that part of it, but being able to regulate the public property for the benefit of the public with reasonable standards that allow everybody to enjoy the property is a different question. So we'll see if, so yes, the issue of living in RVs is going to go up and get decided, car living. All of this is, it will outlast my career, I guarantee you.
So with that being said, on the two options, time, place, well, that's how I'm taking it. There's two options: time, place, and manner restrictions or designated spot. for the designated spot, what does the budget look like for that again? I know you probably don't have it in front of you. Can you?
I don't
Talk
have it
on
in
that.
front of me. It can run up to $80,000 probably a year if we're paying for rental fencing, porta potty. I want to say a porta pot runs maybe $4,000 for the year. That includes hand washing. Garbage pickup would be done by our Public Works crew, as would be general site cleanup. The high cost is going to be with a social service agency to go close that site every morning. And part of the reason for that is, frankly, I don't want that to be a police action. It's not a police department function. I want a social service agency that can go in and speak to people who have been sleeping outside overnight about where they can get services and move off the street. I think that's the ultimate goal in terms of trying to address homelessness, is to help people get into permanent and, if needed, supportive living so that they don't live on the street. And so that was where I was going in terms of trying to have that contract, to have a social service agency close the site in the morning and work with people to get them into services.
If I remember correctly, it ran like 80 to 130,000 depending on the site.
It depends on the
Selected.
site, and it would depend on
Trying to pull it
what is being asked. So originally, it was kind of opening it at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then closing it. And I think what would need to happen, because the site would need to be available to everyone with no rules, would be just to unlock the gate at some point so that anybody can go in through the course of the night, and then lock it again so that people would leave in the morning.
And do we have examples where this concept's worked, where they actually leave?
No,
We don't.
no.
Because it hasn't worked.
Well, exactly. That's,
it-
I guess that's my point, is that people that aren't following the law already, they're going to adhere to a,
Which is,
If it's not
Time
manned all the
limitation.
time,
if it's what?
if it's not manned all the time,
Yeah.
you're going to have a problem.
yeah.
Well, and that really drives home the point of, this is a law enforcement tool. This is not something that the city is doing in order to establish areas within the city to allow people to camp or sleep or anything. This is a tool to the law enforcement to get, so that they can do something,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So that they can, they can enforce the anti-camping laws, that they can enforce the lying, sleeping laws that will be on the books during the day on sidewalks and in doorways and, and in parks overnight. I think that's what's lost sometimes in the discussion, is that doing nothing means that those calls to the police, those complaints that are getting directed to the police, not going to go unanswered, but they're going to be told that there's nothing they can do.
Right.
And that's, I think, one of the things that we need to really understand. And Frank, Chief, you can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, but nobody likes to tell the public more that there's nothing they can do than the Lebanon Police Department.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, Frank, if you could give us some input, how the two choices would affect you. If you had a set spot, and that's how you had to police, or if we put sensible time, place, and manner where you can move people off unpopular places, how does that affect your job, and which is easier, harder, or indifferent?
I believe looking at the time, place, and manner option would be an easier way for us to enforce what needs to be enforced rather than a set location. Because again, there's really no examples to base, how that would even work, and if these people or individuals would even leave. So
Yeah.
I think the time, place, and manner, looking at both those options would be probably the best, a better tool for us.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
And keep in mind, if we decide on something following, listening to all the folks that have been waiting patiently, if we decide that we want to go with the time, place, manner, that doesn't end it there. We can always revisit it and change as the circumstances change.
Absolutely.
But I think there's not anything wrong with going the easy way to begin with and see how it works, and then revisit it and see if we need to make changes.
Yeah, because none of the decision we're making tonight is not going to end it all. And it's just not going to go away. I totally agree. Yeah, it's just starting. So I guess I would ask maybe the city attorney and the city manager a couple of these questions. because I know people out in the audience are probably thinking this. If we don't do anything on July 1st, do we turn into a pumpkin? What happens?
Well, nothing really happens, nothing changes. In other words, we still can't enforce, we can't enforce our anti-camping rules. We can't enforce a lot of the things that this ordinance allows us to enforce. And to be quite honest, there are certain things that we can still do, even in light of the Boise case and state law, but we've been walking on eggshells pending the adoption of something as suggested with the time, place, and manner or the location. And I'm sure the police association are getting advice from their state association and their insurance company to walk on eggshells. And, there's people out there just looking to file lawsuits, those damn lawyers, so, so we've been walking on eggshells. If we did nothing, I would suggest that we would end up looking at what we can still do within the bounds of the law in our current code. But it certainly wouldn't be what passing something tonight gets us.
No, I guess the other question is the liability for the city. If we have a designated spot, do we create a what's it called? A
State
stated?
created danger.
Yeah.
I don't think, I think that is really far-fetched. I did some research on it again today. I'd done some previously. And, the state created danger, it actually kind of makes sense but it has to be an affirmative creation of an otherwise not present danger. The state actually has to do, or the city or the actor, the state actor, it goes a lot farther than we're setting up a camp and somebody gets hurt at the camp. That's not gonna suffice. It kind of just goes back to the normal negligence, but for the action of the state actor, would the harm have occurred? And is it the proximate cause of the injury that was sustained? So, maybe an example would be, if we build an intersection and there's a wreck at that intersection, they don't get to sue the city. If we build an intersection and we forget to put up a stop sign, maybe, But so, of all of the cases where they allege a state-created danger, I only found a couple where they were actually found to be liable. And it was pretty egregious. It was over 2 years, a person calling the Department of Health Services, not in Oregon, and saying how this child was getting abused, how this dad was abusing his child. And over a 2-year period, all these calls went unanswered. And lo and behold, the kid ends up with brain damage and permanent disabilities. And after they showed all of these complaints, all of these calls for response and all of this, they finally did say that that was a straight created danger because that was supposed to be the mechanism that was supposed to protect that child. So that was an example that I found. And there was another example was an officer pulled over a vehicle in a very, I guess it would be considered a dangerous neighborhood. And the driver got arrested and the passenger was a young female. And they took the male into custody, and they just she asked, and this was back probably, I don't know how long ago it was, but she didn't have any other options. She asked, well, what am I supposed to do? And they said, well, you can stay in the car, you can walk, which doesn't seem reasonable for a young female in a bad neighborhood. She ended up trying to walk home, and she ended up getting raped on her walk home. And so the state was found liable in that based on the actions of that one officer, because that's a danger she wouldn't have had not the state acted in an unreasonable manner. So I know that there's the insurance CIS, and there has been these concerns over a state-created danger, but pretty much anything that the city does, it has to do reasonably, right? So as long as what we do is reasonable and we don't create a danger, we don't create an act or a situation that is negligent in which causes harm, then we'll be fine. And it's not that different from where our liability is already. So I don't see that the state-created danger is a reason for doing one or the other. I know there's people that disagree with that. There's lawyers that disagree with that, but that's my opinion.
Nancy, did you have anything else?
Nope, he covered it.
The council, have any other questions, comments?
I just wanted to add, because we were unclear on the amount that we were looking at financially. So I pulled up the packet from May. We've got 270,000 in ARPA funds that are left over. And Councilor Olfors was right. We're looking at between 78,000 and 131,000, at least with the previous sites annually, or at least for the first year. So that's what a site designation at least was previously identified for us. So just a reminder as we enter into comments.
Thank you.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes.
I'm going to ask for somebody to make one amendment tonight, assuming that we're going to pass something. And if you look at the definitions in 12.14, I defined, and I want to explain why this is in there. In the definition, there's a definition of, let me get to the right one here. Established camping site. It says for purposes of ORS 195-500 through 195-530, an established camping site means. Okay, established camping site is important because that's the separate state law that requires a 72-hour posting of notice and a bunch of other requirements as it relates to basically sweeping a camp. And so it didn't define what an established camping site is. So we need to set what that, we have the discretion, at least until somebody tells us differently, of what a established camping site means. And I had put in there, based on a couple other ordinances that I had reviewed, 24 consecutive hours. And I don't think that's long enough. I mean, basically, somebody sets up a camp over the weekend and the police aren't able to get over there within 24 hours, all of a sudden it becomes an established camp. So what I would ask, I have seen anywhere from 72 hours, which is the recommendation of the League of Oregon Cities, but I've also seen several different ordinances that are defining it at 5 days. So I don't care which of those two, but at the point that we get to actually considering adoption of it, I would ask that somebody make at least consider making an amendment to change the definition of established camping site.
Any other comments, questions? All righty. We'll move into public comments. Remember, public comments, you have 5 minutes. At the end of your 5 minutes, there'll be a 2-minute where the counselors can ask questions. Please keep it under the 5 minutes. I will use this, and it's not because we don't want to hear what you have to say, but be clear, concise, and to the point. Most of the time, it goes pretty well. So, but we want to hear what you have to say. So when you're up here speaking, you'll see a green light. When it goes to amber, that means you have 1 minute left. When it goes to red, it means your 5 minutes is up. All righty? Okay, and please respect everybody's comments when they're up there. Please no public outbursts when they're giving their comments. Even if you don't agree with it, let them, it's their time to speak. This is their venue to speak, and we need to respect that and everybody's opinion on this issue. So we'll move into public comments. Lorraine Blattner. She's in Ward 3.
Mr. Mayor, can you call someone on deck so we're
Yeah,
moving
David
through these?
Shemp
Thank you.
will be next. Oh, thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for continuing the conversation for the designated sleep area. I'm Lorraine Blotter, and we own the dental office across the street from the proposed site at the old gas station on Oak Street. My husband, Jeff Blotter, spoke in front of you last month and kept it short and simple to allow time for others to speak. He provided a written statement at that time as well. Many of our questions and concerns were addressed in others' comments and questions. However, we still have more. I know that you will not be able to answer them tonight, but I do hope they will be answered as the ones were from last month's meeting. We do believe that there can be a solution that's the safest and most productive, not only for both the owners of businesses and homes near any of the proposed sites, but also for those using the designated site. I want to propose that the location of the gas station be removed. Ralston Park is the main park downtown for many city events. What will happen when the Christmas lights are up and families want to enjoy that tradition when there is a nightly encampment there? There are movies in the park scheduled this summer, and they end past the time the sleeping area is opened. You want families walking the area when there's a collection of homeless people congregating? In our written statement last month, we spoke of the issues we already have with the homeless in that park during our business hours. And as a side note, we're only open Monday through Thursday, and so there's actually nobody at our location from Friday through Saturday to even see what's happening. So much so that we have invested thousands of dollars in our security and surveillance systems for our building. We will have to spend thousands more if this site is chosen because we'll have to increase those systems as well as place a gate across our driveway. This is the only way to keep our patients, our staff, and ourselves feeling safe under the circumstances. And honestly, it feels like we're getting closer to downtown Portland. All of my questions in regards to the sites can be applied to any residential or business owner. If funds are to be put into our properties as a result of these sites, then this council hopefully can push back on the state to get tax credits or funds in order to cover those expenses. In the proposals, costs will be incurred for the renting of fences. Why would the city rent and not just buy fencing? That would cost substantially less, and if sites get moved, the fencing can be moved with it. And why is there a fence if they can come and go? I'm just curious on why we need the cost for that. If there is a local church, such as the one who spoke last month and is basically running as a soup kitchen and potential shelter, then why aren't we pooling our resources and supporting what is currently in place to establish a possible shelter? In regards to the Ralston Park area in general, if a designated sleeping site is there, those that are using it will just remain in the park until it's time to go into the sleeping area. That park will then turn into the main area homeless will congregate all hours of the day. The park will be even worse than it is now for polluting the canal, keeping families away from enjoying it, and destroying its beauty. No matter that there is way more of a chance that pedestrians will get hit sooner or later by the vehicles, including semi-trucks, since that is one of the busiest intersections in town. I also think in general, the gas station area should be used as a bus stop instead of the actual Oak Street, which will help from pedestrians standing on the street even now waiting for the bus. It's been told to us that state or federal land hasn't been offered, but I would actually like to know if the council has asked for state or federal land to be used as one of these designated areas. I know a list has been provided for city-owned property, but I haven't seen a list for state or federal-owned property in our city limits. What will happen when a site is created and no one uses it? All this money is spent by the city in applicable residents or businesses for what? I also propose at a minimum, this council changes sidewalk ordinances so that property owners aren't held accountable legally or financially for homeless damage or accidents. The Berlin Road one needs to be removed as well. We own property on Berlin Road, and that section of the road is very dangerous. Cars speed around those corners. There's also many fires in that general area due to vagrant activities. The safety of that population and property owners needs to be paramount, no matter the vicinity of the river, Gill's Landing, and the River Park. And I do also believe that the train station one needs to be removed, as this historic location is really our only tourist attraction. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. You must have practiced that, was right on. David Shemp, and after that it'll be William Havjan. I believe I pronounced that correctly.
Good afternoon.
Fabian? Okay.
Good afternoon, Mayor Jackala, councilors. My name is Dave Shamp, and I reside at 32721 Berlin Road in Lebanon, just barely in Lebanon. I'm providing comments today regarding the proposed designated sleeping area on Berlin Road at Grant Street. My wife and I recently moved to Lebanon, so I'm an outsider for a bit, but sometimes that outside perspective can be valuable. I retired as the road operations and maintenance manager for Washington County, a position that I held for over 10 years. My 39 years of road design, construction, and maintenance experience provides the basis for my comments relating to the proposed designated sleeping area on Berlin Road. As was mentioned by the previous speaker, the proposed area is immediately adjacent to the road and between two very severe corners. The paved road section at this location is very narrow, with the width restricted by a guardrail on the riverside of the road. In fact, there's only about 24 inches of shy distance between the fog line and the guardrail. 24 inches. Further restricting the available road width with jersey barriers to protect the sleeping area will make this section of roadway more dangerous for road users. Installing jersey barriers and allowing temporary structures of some sort, tents or whatever people might use to protect themselves, will likely impede the available sight distance for the gravel portion of Grant Street that intersects Berlin Road at this location. Additionally, according to the site-specific evaluation, this location would be accessed by walking. Currently, there is no provision for safely walking alongside Berlin Road. As previously mentioned, the site is located between two corners with limited sight distance and a very narrow road width. There's no illumination, no pedestrian improvements on this section of Berlin Road. Walk-in users accessing the location from the north would be required to cross railroad tracks that have no pedestrian amenities. Locating a designated sleeping area identified as being foot accessible without providing safe walking infrastructure is exacerbating the current situation and could be creating a serious liability for the city. The city attorney just spoke to that issue. Should the council determine this to be a desirable location for a designated sleeping area, as a regular and frequent user of this section of Berlin Road, I respectfully request that it be evaluated by a licensed professional engineer before a final decision is made. Based on my experience, I would anticipate that the engineer will recommend pedestrian amenities be provided before authorizing its use as a designated sleeping area accessible by foot. If the site is required to be handicap accessible, and I don't know whether that is the case or not, that would likely lead to additional infrastructure needs and costs. I had the honor of serving as a city councilor for the city of Cornelius for 7 years. I know firsthand the challenge you are facing. Balancing legal requirements, community needs, and immediate landowner concerns is never easy. And while the Berlin Road location may be attractive because of its rural nature and few immediate neighbors, the lack of road and pedestrian improvements in this area could create a serious and preventable unsafe condition for roadway and designated sleeping area users. Thank you for considering my input and concerns. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from council? Thank you.
Thank you.
William, and I butchered your name. I apologize.
Habian.
Habian, okay, because Matt Habian is next.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, City Council, thank you very much for the opportunity to address you. I would ask that you have the Berlin Road map available because I will refer to it. As a retired physician, I have many concerns about the safety and problems that would be in the Berlin area. I am the landowner. Basically, this map is my property. It's green, but it's not green now. It's a tinderbox. I have these concerns because the main concern I have will be addressed by another speaker, and that is that this is a school bus stop at this point. Historically, this portion of Berlin Road has been, I've lived there for 43 years, trust me, ask the police department, ask the sheriff's department, innumerable accidents because people love to speed on the curves from town and going toward town. And thank you to the city for installing the guardrail because that has made a difference. The problem, though, is, as the previous speaker was talking, there is no access. If you are at this site, and of course, we know this plan is really good on paper, but you know, it presumes compliant and responsible people. Let's get real, okay? What are we really going to be dealing with? So theoretically, they're going to come at 6 and be gone by 7, no trace, okay. Well, they're going to walk to the parks. How are they going to get to the park? The only way to get to the park is walking on Berlin Road. On the east side of Berlin Road, there is no pedestrian access. On the west side of Berlin Road, the river side, it's a very narrow gravel area that, believe me, when I cross the road to pick up my mail, I look 3 times because of the speeders, the accidents, the people who spin out and regain control, which happens on a very regular basis. So we're going to have homeless people who we know will be doing drugs. We know some of them are mentally incompetent. We're going to have them in an unlit, very dark area on an extremely dangerous portion of road. And they're going to be getting up in the middle of the night, perhaps, wandering across the road. It's extremely hazardous for the possibility of accidents there. One of the concerns that I have, and if you refer to the map, the area that was highlighted is about twice as big as reality. The reality is, if you look at Berlin Road, which is the light gray stripe, then you'll see a little darker portion and a white lighter portion. That lighter portion is the old road. That is the edge of what would be the encampment, because you see to the east of that little white stripe is a darker stripe. That is an open ditch for stormwater. That stormwater collects there, goes down to a culvert, which goes under Berlin Road and dumps directly into the South Santiam River. You're going to have porta potties. In the middle of the night, are you going to choose a porta potty or a handy ditch? I ask you. Oh, I'm going yellow. Okay, a big concern I have is that on Sunday, there was a brush fire by South Fork Industrial. Yesterday, there's a brush fire that as of this afternoon was not put out. Both of those are less than a mile from this area. The area that is also highlighted there is basically a hillside that goes up to my brown pasture. One thrown cigarette and we have the whole thing ablaze. And this is a very real concern that I have. In closing, I'd like to say I think the police department is the best site for this because there would be oversight. You would see what's going on. People could move in and out. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Any questions?
Matt's up next, and after that is Todd Covington. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you for taking my time. I'm in opposition for the Berlin Road location as well. I just want you guys to see my son here. He is representing children. He does not currently live there, but he spends a lot of time there. And you can sit down. As my father mentioned, that location is a bus stop. And it's not just a bus stop, but it is the stop for the entirety of East Grant, which is many houses. It is also a dead-end road. And that location, multiple kids in every age group for every school that has buses, they conglomerate down to that location where they get picked up by the bus. There's no way that that bus stop can move because of the danger that has been mentioned multiple times of that curve. And so that bus stop will be directly next to any encampment here. And I think that there would just be a lot of danger and liability for the children who potentially could very well be unescorted, or for people who might be at the encampment who are not being vetted, who might be on registers as sex offenders. They would be able to see these children who they know where they live because they will be there picking up themselves, getting picked up by the school bus before 7 o'clock when those people can still be there. That'll be for 3/4 of the year. It might not be school time right now, but it will be then. And that's just a major concern of mine, that all of these people, and unfortunately, because many of those houses are outside of the 250 foot, they probably are not being represented here because they didn't get the knowledge that this is a location being looked at. So all of them don't realize that this is going to be directly impacting their children. Secondly, I've spent a lot of time in that location, fixing and cleaning up just in general. And having cleaned out a lot of ivy around there, I went down to that lower area below across the street. And that area is a wonderful, beautiful spot. And it has multiple signs of vagrant camps in the past. And so what we would be doing would be setting up a hub for not just the nighttime use people, but people as well who can say, oh, well, I got kicked out here. I'm going to move down to the river and spend the day here. And maybe I'll just stay in the river because nobody's enforcing that. We're talking about social services people who would be coming to remove the people in the morning, but this would be more of a police matter now because it's trespassing or because it's on the river property with people who are going to be staying there a lot longer than just overnight with very little oversight. So that area, there is no clear boundary. There might be a boundary on the map for that location, but there is no boundary for vagrants to be able to wander beyond those points after they've been removed from that location. And they will see that as a location that is very ideal for them because there's a porta potty, a wash site, and a spot to come back to at night. So that, I think, is a very negative location for something to see as long-term. That would be very negative for the people in that location. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from council? All righty. Sir?
Yes, my name is Todd Covington. I'm also new to the area of about 1.5 years. I'm not a public speaker, so I will read my notice to you. There is a need to limit opportunities. It sounds like you've already done that. It sounds like maybe 2 places you've been more considerate to others. There is a problem with having camping on an area of soft ground or grass. An example of the cost of reclamation of the Washington Jefferson Park in Eugene, Oregon, which served as a temporary urban camp for unhoused people for about 1 year during the height of the pandemic epidemic. That cost was around $800,000, not $130,000. Is what happened after 1 year when they went in to reclaim this area. They had to remove 3 to 5 inches of soil from acres of land because of small debris, including needles, which were nestled down in the ground, again, between 1 and 5 inches. That is a great cost that needs to also be considered. Camping also needs to be supervised to control littering, safety, open fires, to just mention a few. We had a fire not too far from our house just last night. A couple of things that might be considered. for time, place, and manner would be, an example of this would be like in Eugene. So you might take a look at a couple of things that they've done for the people who are homeless. One of the things that they've done is Dusk to Dawn, now named Dawn to Dawn, which is a low barrier drop-in shelter program that provides space where people can stay, keep their belongings, and receive connections to services, community services. The shelter provides heat, it's a multi-tent facility that houses around 105 people. They have hand washing facilities, showering and toileting facilities on site. Meals are provided at an alternative site, which is a few blocks away. I've personally been at the facility, and it's very organized, very well kept. The other thing that Eugene is doing, along with other communities along the West Coast, are tiny houses costing about $200,000, and perhaps they charge residents probably around $200 a month for rent, which includes utilities, maintenance, a share in equity. There are common kitchens, bathrooms, showers, gathering spaces. So 30 houses cost around $200,000. Today's affordable housing developments often cost $200,000 per unit, which is not a practical or sustainable alternative. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any questions from council? We're going to go online. Do we have anybody online? Laura or Ian? Laura Hastings is ready. Oh. What, Ian? Yeah. Oh, come forward, sir. We'll just knock.
On deck.
What's that?
On deck.
Laura Hastings will be on deck. So,
Howdy.
hi there.
Hello. Can I go? Okay. Hello, City Council Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity to provide feedback on the proposed designated homeless sleeping area. You're in a tough situation. No matter what you choose, someone will be unhappy. This is no self-inflicted problem either. You were dealt lemons and you have to do your best to make lemonade. I appreciate your leadership and wish you best of luck as you make your decision. Also, I hope the rest of the Lebanon community understands external powers created this situation. Much of the fault lies with areas of the state that enabled homelessness to become a major issue. The decision to create a designated camping area was forced on the City Council and Mayor by the 9th Federal Circuit Court. The court ordered if a city lacks designated homeless sleeping area, then the city cannot stop anyone from camping on public property. Therefore, all of Lebanon's sidewalks and parks could become a homeless camp, including the sidewalks in front of our homes. If no designated camping area is selected, then Lebanon could do little to prevent the city from turning it into a miniature version of Portland's homeless dystopia. After reviewing the special meetings document, overnight site for people to seek protection from the elements, it is my opinion Burdell Boulevard is the best option for the sleeping area. That site is the best because it is the farthest from residential areas and closest to the fewest number of businesses. After an amazing revitalization downtown, it would be foolish to risk losing the momentum gained. Downtown businesses are part of what makes Lebanon great, and keeping that area business friendly will attract more growth. Maintaining a buffer away from residential areas is also critical to the placement of the sleeping area. Lebanon residents deserve to feel safe and secure in their homes and on their property. It is no secret that theft, trespassing, public defecation, and drug use are common to homeless camps. A small fraction of Lebanon's residents should not have to bear the burden of proximity, so the rest of us don't have to. The Burdell site minimizes that burden to the greatest extent possible. The document does list some technical issues with Burdell, such as violation of the time, place, and manner standards, potential development plans for the area, and railroad access. However, the benefits to the site would outweigh those issues. The TPM can be amended, or maybe the sleeping area can be designed in a way that does not violate the TPM. Regarding future developments near the area, those plans appear to be in the hypothetical phase, so there is still time to find solutions that balance development needs with those of the designated sleeping area. So to reiterate, the Burdell Boulevard location appears to be the best option. Before finishing, I would like to give you something else to think about. If the city has the bandwidth, Lebanon should add a system for formal documentation of homeless-related issues at homeless encampments. Consider documenting laws broken, damages incurred, the influence of drugs and mental status of involved individuals, how the mental status of those specific individuals changes over time, and the cost of maintaining the designated sleeping area and law enforcement at those areas. The Ninth Circuit Court ruling says a designated camping area must be provided, so Lebanon will do that. But the reality is camping areas like this enable self-destructive behaviors from people who struggle to care for themselves. Oregon Revised Statute 426.005 states the definition of mental illness. The statute says someone is mentally ill if, unless untreated, will continue to reasonable medical probability to physically or mentally deteriorate, so that person will become unable to provide basic personal needs that are necessary to avoid serious physical harm in the near future, and is not receiving such care as is necessary to avoid such harm. Formal documentation can show how much of the homeless population falls under that definition. Oregon Health Authority is the state agency responsible for mental health services. Documentation of this kind could provide a foundational argument that OHA is negligent in their management of mental illness in the homeless population. OHA's negligence is upstream of the need for a designated camping area, and the agency's negligence results in harms to cities like Lebanon. Those harms come in the form of overburdened law enforcement, deterioration of the local environment, and vandalism and theft from businesses and residents. At the end of the day, the enablement of homeless camping is a flawed approach. It is also an approach that will continue unless communities such as Lebanon push back against the state. This needs to be done if communities want to preserve their quality of life and for the people who struggle to care for themselves.
Thank you.
Are there any questions from council? Thank you. Laura Hastings, and then after that, it'll be Jason Adamson. Laura's online.
Hello. I live on East Grant Street, just up the hill from the Berlin proposed site. And I just want to echo my neighbor's concerns for if that area is used and there is a fence put up, where is the bus stop going to be for our children to get on the bus? And also our children get on the bus before 7 a.m. So they'll be down there near that site. And that's a real concern, as well as my house is just on the other side of the field. And we've already had several fires started in the area by homeless. And so having a homeless encampment right on the edge of a dry field, just on the other side of my house, is a very dangerous thought to me, as there's only one way in and one way out of East Grant Street. So I just want the city council to take that under consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions for her from council? Thank you so much. Adamson. Sorry.
Sir.
And after that, it'd be Diane. I've already butchered this name tonight. How do you say it again?
Habian.
Thank you. Habian.
Thank you all for having me. Oh, geez. So first and foremost, I'd like to say I appreciate the last meeting we had. Y'all took our public comment into consideration and came up with those alternate sites, which is great. Unfortunately, I wish I would have supported the alternate site close to my house a little bit better, because now it's even closer to my house. So I live at 310 West Grant Street. So that big house right on the corner over there, it's a line of sight through the proposed campsite that's going to be right here, or that wants to be out here at the travel station. I want to talk about my main concerns. Well, first and foremost is my family. That site, to me, affects the same bus stop considerations or paths to school that my kids take every day. One kid that I have, well, I'll have two here in a couple of years, walk down to Green Acres every morning. They leave the house at around 7:15, and if the homeless camp gets closed up at 7, they're all going to go right by in front of my house, walking my kids to school. So yeah, that's a big concern. Another kid walks to Seven Oaks, so he usually takes 2nd Street, so he's going to be walking right by that camp. With family in mind too. My wife, I'm really concerned about her because I'm a first responder, so I am gone for 24 hours. So I'm not at home at night. And sometimes I could be gone for at least, or for at most 2 weeks straight. So I won't be at home with my family when this camp is right across the street from my house in line sight. And so please take that into consideration as well. Another big safety concern for me is train traffic. That train wakes me up at 6:30 every morning. You know, it's fine. I get it. It's like we have a couple companies that utilize that track and they use it quite a bit. But with my first responder job, we find a lot of people sleeping on railroad tracks, having drug overdoses on railroad tracks. And when you put the railroad tracks right next door to them, you know, and that fence is not going to pen them in. We're not closing them into the fence. So they could get up at night, do whatever they want to do. They could get up early and just do all sorts of stuff, like if that's something they want to do. So I've been, just on a number of those issues. Also, tourism is a big consideration for me. The St. Aim excursion train brings in thousands of people into our community. I've participated in local meetings where we talk about different tourism things that we have to focus on. That's our main thing. So, and they run late, right? So sometimes they do the Strawberry Festival thing where they pick people up late at night. Sometimes they do the fireworks show. They have like a late train to watch those at night. And we're just gonna be bringing people into our community and saying, hey, don't get stabbed on your way out home. So, just be careful. So, just, it's tough. It is a tough decision to make, but just don't be that person that jumps in there and wants to immediately remove things right off the bat instead of discussing them like we're supposed to. Because if I had a business downtown, I'm not saying one's right or another because it's not my decision to make, but I don't have to sleep next to that camp at night. I could lock my place up, put a couple bars and cameras. Yeah, it's going to cost me money, but my family is a big consideration. Thank you for your time, and I'm more than happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Actually, I don't, oh, do you have a question?
No, I said, thanks for your service.
I don't actually have a question, but I have a comment. There's a lot of people that do live downtown. Is that what you're getting at, that downtown businesses? Is that what you meant by what you said about the downtown?
Yeah.
Like businesses?
Sure.
Yeah, there actually is a population that lives in the downtown area. So anyhow. After Diane, it will be Lyndon Brown.
Okay. Thank you for hearing us all out tonight. I appreciate that. I am you probably guessed I'm against the Berlin site, as is the rest of my family and our neighbors. I spent some time today talking to a variety of agencies, and one of them was talking with one of the supervisors at the transportation department of the Lebanon School Board or school district. And she clarified that they do have at least one bus that comes by early in the morning and the same bus drops off in the afternoon. This may change. They have a potential change in schedule, and it may mean more buses in the future, but that's not definite. They are very concerned and opposed to a designation sleeping area in the same area as a bus stop for children. They are extremely concerned about the students and their safety. And I certainly get it, even more so now that you're defining this area as a no rules aspect of that area. So I was concerned before, now I'm virtually panicked because that is the least or the most dangerous group of people we could imagine at a school bus stop. And I now realize there's no screening for any of these participants. We don't know what risks to the children and the students that they would bring with them. It is not out of the question that these risks include mental illness, which we've already discussed, sexual predation, and criminal history. that is absolutely frightening to me. And it's really not like a neighborhood bus stop because nobody really lives next to this spot. I mean, we're really not able to kind of monitor from our windows or anything like that. The only reason I knew there was a bus stop is because I would see a bus, but I've never seen a child because I'm not able to see that unless I walk close to there. So it's very, very concerning. There are also, at that same site, 11 mailboxes for everyone living up the hill on East Grant. These have been broken into on more than one occasion. This is what our neighbors tell us. Well, ours was too. East Grant is virtually a dead-end street. They have concerns, they being the people who live on East Grant, that participants in the program may watch traffic, determine patterns for adults and children, and help themselves to the mailboxes, which are not all locked boxes. So they're right there available for them to help themselves to with names, addresses, personal information, and kind of staking out the property. These people only have one way to get to their homes, and that's it, right next to this site. Incidentally, those boxes were relocated from the western side or the river side of Berlin Road to its current location, which is this potential designated site, because the post office, the US government, whatever you want to call it, were told that it was too dangerous for them to cross Berlin Road to get their mail. So now the mailwoman actually has to drive into that area to be able to provide them their mail. So that is the only way that these people can get to that site. They have to cross this truly dangerous, curvy road, and it's not safe, really. I also talked to the fire department today, the fire district, and they informed me that the addition of Berlin Road was something that happened after they had reviewed some of the other sites. I'm just going by what I was told. And because I told them what Bill already told you, that it's really a tinderbox. Where they would be camping sorry.
Please, I'll give you 10 seconds, finish up. Thank you.
I just wanted to mention, as someone also has mentioned, that only the people who are 250 feet from the site were informed. So all of these parents who have children coming there had no idea of this. They were not informed, and it was only by us informing them that they had any idea of what peril their children might be facing. So
Okay.
I find that disturbing.
All righty, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Is there
you
any
very much.
questions or comments from council? Be Lyndon Brown next, and then Tammy Cochran.
Thank you for doing this in this open manner. I think that it goes a long ways to improving the vision of Lebanon. I'm really impressed with a lot of the comments that I've heard. And I kind of, from the last meeting and this meeting, I see two groups of homeless people. The people who are on rough times and would like a hand up. And I think we all want to help them and provide services and make sure they're okay. The rest of them have been kind of foisted upon us and they are causing us problems. So I would like to know if there's any attempt by the people or groups that enable or encourage these groups of homeless people to come in and help them clean up or help themselves or get counseling or treatment. And do any of these groups, from Salem lawmakers to local groups that feel any responsibility to help the locals? And it would be nice if some of these mandates came with some funding. And my other question is, What do you do when nobody comes to your party? What happens when you have this place and no one comes? And I understand all the problems if they show up for 5 minutes and walk out, but I'm just curious about what happens if they don't come. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? After Tammy would be Brock Byers.
Red. Okay. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I'm Tammy Cockrum. I'm a resident of Ward 1. I have firsthand experience in developing policy around homelessness at the local level, so I can appreciate the work, especially by city staff, that has been done in preparation of tonight's meeting. We've learned that policy around homelessness that does not include a sheltering or housing component almost always are unsuccessful policy. It continues to traumatize and marginalize our homeless community. It increases police and staff resources. It costs taxpayers money. And at the end of the day, it solves little, if anything, and keeps individuals in homelessness. But with this being a state mandate, here we are. Should council vote to establish a designated sleeping location, doing so without security is bound to have issues. I think you've already heard some concerns. Congregation of community, regardless of housing status, into the evening and early morning hours, especially those dealing with addiction disorder, mental illness, and trauma, is deemed to be problematic. Some form of security will be necessary for this to be a safe and successful model. Should council vote to pass an ordinance addressing the time, place, and manner, and this also relates to the designated sleeping area, I would ask that you extend the move along time or the out time to be 9 a.m. I think 7 a.m. is early, and for a person with no place to go, I can imagine how difficult it might be, thus leading to engagement with law enforcement. No one understands homeless life except for those living in it today, not 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, but today. The world has changed, the drugs have changed, access to mental health treatment has changed, the narratives around the growing population has changed, and access to housing or shelter is almost non-existent. So I ask you, council, as you continue to make decisions for our communities living on the fringe, living in homelessness, that you include them in the conversation through intentional and meaningful engagement, as they are the experts of their situation, and getting buy-in to these policies on the front end is important to everyone's success. And lastly, before June ends, I just want to say Happy Pride Month. This is an important month for celebration for our LGBTQ+ community, and I want to recognize them for who they are, who they love, and the battles they so bravely continue to fight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? After Brock Byers is Catherine Merritt.
Good evening. My name is Brock Byers. I'm a program manager for Family Assistance and Resource Center Group and Shirley Bird's group up there in Sweet Home. And we implemented the low barrier, Lynn County's first low barrier up in Sweet Home. First, I'd like to thank and acknowledge the courage of the mayor and this council to address this very tough issue. I'm actually quite amazed. You look at the community. Coming here in 2018 and 2019, it was usually just Shirley and I at these type of meetings. And it's exciting to see participation and folks actually beginning to address this issue. I wanted to provide a few, observations. We run a managed facility, a managed operations. And I think even one of your council members did comment on what Sweet Home looked like with their unmanaged facility. Unmanaged is very difficult. City of Sweet Home is spending over $100,000 just with their public works in cleanup in sites all over the city and that particular site. To give you a little idea of our operations, we've had 79 different individuals. We had 59 separate individuals in June. We provide services, food. We had over 3,000 bed nights since January when we opened. kind of the profile, a little bit of a profile, believe it or not, 42% of our clients are victims of domestic violence. So we talk about violent unhoused folks. These folks are actually on the other side. We have severe disabilities. That's about 34%. Severe mental illness is at 32%, and alcohol and drug addiction is about 46%. We have 2 locations that are allowed in Sweet Home. So basically, we provide the shelter in Sweet Home, and if there are overflow, they go to the police department to be on site there. So some of the things that have happened in 2022, there were roughly 104 calls, police calls. In 2023, we had 56 calls. And while that's, half, if you look at the dynamics of the calls, so our calls, the majority of our calls were actually, we have rules and guidelines. So a lot of our calls are what we call trespass calls. When individuals don't follow the rules, they get trespassed. The other piece is property. We work closely with the police department, and they help us manage property, lost property, or illicit drugs or things like that. If you look at some of the calls from 2022, this was the unmanaged site. They had 3 assaults. They had 55 suspicious people because in the community, they would call, who in the hell's in my backyard? We had a death, several fires. We had business alarms and neighborhood disputes. So an unmanaged facility is really a difficult solution for you. Let's see here. I guess that's pretty much, I just wanted to give a little bit of an idea. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I wasn't there about 2 weeks ago, but I would extend an offer to any of you if you would like to visit the site. We don't allow guests, so it's unfortunately kind of found out, but we can arrange to have you come on site and take a look. And then I'm open for any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any comments, questions from council? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Catherine Merritt, and then after that, it'll be Wes Myler.
Mayor, Council, thank you for giving us time tonight to speak on this issue. I've actually, I moved to Lebanon in 2014, and I had been homeless for 9 months at that point. And the reason I was homeless, I had a construction company up in Portland that was devastated by the recession. Like a lot of people, I lost everything. So frankly, I moved to Lebanon because there was an affordable apartment here. That's not the case now, but it was in 2014. In 2015, there was a summit on homelessness, and I was very excited that this city that I didn't know very well was going to be discussing this issue and hopefully doing something about it. Things may have been happening, but I don't feel that the city is very transparent about what's happening, so I didn't know what was going on. Well, 8 years later now, we're still in a homeless situation. My comments don't address any of the proposed sleep sites. I don't like any of them. I don't think it's worthy or humane to put people on a slab and call it shelter or protection from the elements. It's something else. It's meeting the state law or whatever, but it's not where I would like to see a human being put. I'm thrilled that several of the speakers have brought up shelters. And I was at a previous meeting where shelters were discussed, the cost of shelters, the cost of operating shelters, and how difficult that would be. But I think Brock's data and the discussion around what happens in homeless camps might make you want to think more seriously about finding the money and the support and the management for a shelter. One speaker mentioned a church acting similarly to a shelter, and I believe that would be St. Martin's. I volunteer there 3 days a week. Um, I'm, I'm wishing that more people would come to the breakfast. We don't turn people away, even if you are housed. We'll even feed you. But I think that there's a lot to be learned by having up close interactions with people who are in really difficult times. Now, 30 to 40 people come to our breakfast Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I don't have data, but I think over half of them are elderly. A large number of them are disabled. A lot of them have addictions. Many of them have dogs. We let them all in and we try to support them. Now, the really cool thing that started to happen in the last year is that the service agencies in Lebanon have started to come to the church for the 4 hours that we're serving breakfast and engage with the people who are there for breakfast and try to get them services. So I'm going to take the last little bit to thank some people. Samaritan has been coming in now recently with their mental health workers. That's essential for the problems that people experiencing homelessness for their situation. We have a lawyer who comes in once, I think once a week, to provide some legal advice. Community Services Consortium came and provided housing assistance. Western University comes and provides medical training for their students and care for the homeless. So that's some of the stuff that happens there. All of those things start to provide an opportunity for homeless people to heal so that they can get back into some kind of real life. I haven't met anybody yet who really enjoys the state of homelessness. So I hope something could move forward with the shelter. Albany and Sweet Home, Corvallis, they're all offering examples, good examples of how those shelters could be run. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Wes Myler. Come on up, sir. And then after that, it'd be Erica Myler.
Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I am one of those homeowners on East Grant Street. And due to this 250-foot notification only, I was not notified of this until just late last night. I'm eternally grateful to the Habians, good neighbors, who went door to door last night on Grant Street trying to inform us of what was happening. And I almost narrowly missed them because I was gone to my son's baseball game. And I am so grateful that I did not miss them and I was able to speak with them. I am vehemently opposed to the Berlin Road location proposal. If you go to that location and look, not only is it the northern entrance to all of Berlin Road, everyone that lives down Berlin Road, but it's also the only entrance and exit to East Grant Street. As has been mentioned before, it is a dead-end street. It goes up the side of the hill where the water tower is. Yes, it is a dry tinderbox in the summer. As a husband and a father, I am incredibly fearful, especially the last few summers, with all the fires popping up everywhere. If that hill is ignited somewhere, that whole mountain is going to go up in flames. And as there only being that one exit out of there, that is incredibly dangerous for those of us that live up there on that hill. Also, you've heard that this is a school bus stop. My kids are the ones getting on and off that school bus in that location. I have a 14-year-old son that goes to the high school. I have an 11-year-old son that goes to Hamilton Creek. I have a 7-year-old daughter that goes to Hamilton Creek. I have a 4-year-old daughter that will be going to Hamilton Creek soon. All of them get on and off those buses. She will be doing it in the near future. I want you to picture your own kids and grandkids standing right here today in this situation. As has been said before, this is a very busy, high-speed area. A couple of tight curves, very little area. There's no sidewalk. There's no room to walk. It's very dangerous. If there is an encampment going on there, and let's get real, like I said before, we can place rules and restrictions around this, but let's get real. This is going to turn into a tent city. It'll be a permanent tent city. People are not going to wait until a designated time to show up. They're not going to pack everything up and leave by some designated time in the morning. It's just not going to happen. So is this a shameless plug, having my children up here on display? Absolutely it is. Nothing is more paramount to me than the safety and well-being of my children. I want everyone to think really hard about that and picture your own families and your own children and grandchildren. As was said already, this is the only way in and out of Grant Street. If there are people spending considerable amount of time there, they're going to watch the traffic coming and going. They're going to know who lives there, what cars we drive, what our routines are, when we come, when we go, when we're not at home, when our homes are vacant and vulnerable, when our children may be home alone without the parents' supervision. There's multiple building lots for sale on that hill, East Grant Street. I think about the land developer and the seller and the real estate agents whose livelihoods and income depend on the sale of those lots. I want you to ask yourselves, if there was a homeless encampment in this location, would you buy one of those lots to build a home for your family and your kids? Would you buy one of the homes that are already there if it came up for sale? You've already recognized that in the time, place, and manner restrictions that 1,000 feet from a school is not acceptable. 10 feet away from a school bus stop is not acceptable either, not even close. We can all dream of being noble and altruistic and trying to help the homeless people, but at what cost? At the danger of kids getting on and off school buses, at the danger of all the homeowners that live up there on that hill, dry tinder box, just waiting in fear that the whole mountain's going to go up in flames. I hope not. I'm out of time. Thank
Yes.
you again. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Do you have any comments?
I'm the next one, so I'm his
Yes.
wife, Ariela. My biggest concern, thank you for listening to us and being, I know it's a tough decision. My biggest concern are my children. The safety as far as the bus stop being there in the first place is a very, very dangerous corner on both sides coming from either way. As it is, even with the bus pulling in, is very difficult to watch for those cars that can very easily derail off the road. And the uncertainty of who is there, the safety of my kids is paramount. And I am terrified at the idea of somebody watching my children, watching me come in and out, watch me get my mail. We leave early in the morning. My almost 15-year-old can be up there in the house watching the kids sometimes. And that is very difficult to know that they're not safe and there's nobody up there. And being trapped there by the first, not having the ability of first responder getting to my kids or my family in case of a fire or anything worse, it is debilitating. I think that if something like that would happen and we wouldn't be able to get out, is frightening and is terrifying. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Any questions, comments? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Up next is Angie Silverman and then Connie Rush.
Hello, thank you.
most everything that's already been said is pretty much everything I would say as well. You know, it is very concerning of the amount of people that are going to be there, the obstructions. It is hard to see on that road going in and out. I'm all for helping the homeless, you know, those who choose to help themselves. It was very concerning when you stated that these are the people that won't follow the rules or don't follow the rules that will be living there. So how is that fair to the homeowners and the children and the people that are there when you already know that? So it's very concerning. As was stated earlier, people would understand the patterns of people coming in and out. We have mail there. Our mail's been stolen numerous times, so I'm sure while we're gone, they'll be checking the mail. All those mailboxes, none of them are locked. You know, the city would have to do something about the security of that, as well as the homes and the people there. So pretty much everything that's been said, I definitely appreciate and feel the same. Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you.
Thank
Any questions, comments? Connie Rush?
Thank you for letting me address you on such short notice. I just really found out about the meeting because I too live outside of town on Hidden Valley. And I've heard all the testimonies and I have to agree that I'm disagreeing with the Berlin Road for, of course, all their issues. And that hill up there, Hidden Valley, is like just a giant wind tunnel. Anything that catches fire here in the valley comes up those hills like the force you wouldn't believe. We don't have water in those hills. So a forest fire is a big concern of ours, especially after 2020, where, you know, we were going to have to evacuate up on our hill. So that being said, I really believe that we need to help the homeless. But again, like that one lady said, I don't think just having a temporary city for them to go maybe next to our rivers and pollute. You know, we've all gone camping and seen where people can't dig their little cat hole and bury in their tissues and everything. It's not going to be different along our river where we have a boat landing and things like that. So I don't know if there's any public buildings available. I think of a lot of buildings that are empty downtown, like the old Skate City. Used to be that the Elks was, or the Moose was vacant for a long, long time. So maybe we can think about something like this. I know Albany has a good structure in place that Dr. Goby actually started up. I think that's a worthy thing to look at. And that's just really all I wanted to say. For the people outside of the city, we still have issues with people on the outskirts of the city who can start fires and pollute our rivers and cause damage to us out in the country. And I just wanted us country folks to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any comments, questions? Is there any more cards? Is that it? Okay. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on this matter? Please come forward.
Brian Corbett, I own San Diego Physical Therapy over on East Grant Street. One of the proposals is the private property owned currently by Jeff Hetherington. Of course, that is directly behind Servco, and the access to that property is on the east side of Servco, right between my business and the little teriyaki restaurant. The current challenges of the traffic of, I guess, termed homeless traveling through there every morning. I have to police the back of my property to pick up and discard. I won't even say what. I have to wear gloves. I have to be very careful before I kick the clothing or whatever aside, just to make sure I'm not grabbing a needle. I feel for the homeless. I also know that the safety of my patients and the safety of those who are frequent that area, some people are concerned to even come because of the traffic that travels through my parking lot. Placing the facility that you're proposing there would make that worse. I already have huge concerns with the way it is currently handled. And I'm assuming based on the numbers that you're describing, the 78,000 to 131,000, the increased cost of the liability insurance, as well as the cost of maintaining that size of a property. We're talking about more than 4 acres. Also, that is so rough and has a bunch of tree stumps still in place. I don't know how you level that enough without a considerable cost to make it an effective place. I'm more concerned about, though, the situation as far as safety. I've personally tried to develop my property and have hit multiple roadblocks with the city. Concerns with the access to the new medical school. We haven't heard from anybody from them today, but the proposal is to have that road become much wider and go right up over the tracks into the new area there. If I were the medical school, I would be concerned. We have this facility that everybody gets to pass as they come to decide whether coming to Lebanon to both medical school and PT school and OT school and the others that they would like to bring. It's as much as I would hope there's a viable solution and a shelter for the homeless, I would love for that to have something where there is some control. If the law doesn't allow the control, then this turns into a fiasco of major proportions based on the traffic that is already there. And I have no recourse for any of that, right? I just get to pick up the trash. My building has been broken into. I get to go to the cost of cameras and security. It's and we find the individuals who stole the stuff from my property, and because they have multiple warrants, and it's left in the law enforcement has no ability to do anything to them except turn them back to either the probation officer or to the courts. And the courts say these warrants aren't bad enough to even put them in prison, even though they have $5,000 worth of your stuff. I don't need more of that issue on my property. I respect your responsibility to do this. I respect everybody who's spoken concerning the concerns with each of these properties. The challenge is if we're just the homeless who are there because they do not have enough to provide for their own needs, those can be taken care of, but that is not the group that's going to frequent these sites. Because as soon as they're there and the rest of the group comes in that is doing drugs and choosing to be homeless in many situations because they choose that, many will say that
Respectful, please. Go ahead and finish.
My experience is that that's the case, and I've heard that from multiple law enforcement individuals. That's very, very concerning to me.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Let's take a recess at this time. We will reconvene in 10 minutes. Public hearing is hereby closed at 6:54 PM. All further discussion is limited to council and staff at this time.
Microphone on.
I'll say that again. Public hearing is hereby closed at 6:54 PM. All further discussions will be limited to council and staff at this time. Anybody want to start out? Go ahead. Floor is open.
I have several questions. The time, place, and manner sites, are we able to trim the available options down from what is listed?
Certainly. So what, if you only go with time, place, and manner and not a designated location, and again, coming back to police enforcement here, if a police officer found somebody sleeping in Academy Square at midnight, they would be able to say, you cannot be here, but here are 3 or 4 places that you can be legally sleeping. So grab your stuff and go to one of these 3 or 4 places. So you wouldn't have a named location, but if you took sites off of consideration, that would take those sites out of the opportunity for police to name them. And again, I think we noted in the staff report that there are some locations that would not be suitable, that if the council designated, and Burdell Boulevard is an example, if the council designated Burdell Boulevard, it would not meet time, place, and manner because it is a public right-of-way, it's a road. And so the council would need to exclude that time, place, and manner requirement by designating that site. If the council goes with time, place, and manner only and doesn't designate a site, the police department would not be able to refer anyone to Burdell Boulevard because it's a public right-of-way road. And it would not be set up with any kind of Jersey barrier protections from vehicular traffic, for example. So there's some elements there, I think, that one, the council can have a set of rules and then say, we exempt this location for these reasons. If you have the rules only, then you would not exempt any of those locations, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yep. So I guess the problem I have with the time, place, and manner is that we're saying, yeah, you can't sleep in the parks, but there's all these other places, and several which have been listed, that nobody likes. So we would either have to trim down the ones we don't like, and then it becomes 3 designated camping areas, even though they're not designated, but maybe that saves us money because we don't have to prep the site. Or we name one spot and we have to find one spot that we all agree on. On the no rules, that was, I guess I was under the impression previously that we could set rules for a designated site.
So we would have the site posted with some rules. Those are largely going to be things like, be respectful of others, space and items, quiet for the neighborhood. We won't have any way to control that. And I guess I would say, I don't disagree with the speakers who said our better bet would be either a managed camp or a shelter. We don't have anybody stepping up to operate a managed camp or to operate a shelter. And the people who have spoken with me over the last couple of months suggesting, we should have a shelter, I could work on setting that up. They also come at it with, and so what is the city property you're going to give me? What's the building you're going to buy for me to run a shelter? And we don't have the resources to do that. Other communities that have shelters have nonprofits. So you've got Family Assistance Center, that's a nonprofit running the shelter in Sweet Home. You've got Chance and Helping Hands in Albany. Those are nonprofits, and they have working relationships with the city. And where the city can get grant money that comes to the city for operating a shelter or something like that, those relationships can be relatively strong and work well. But it's the matter of applying for a grant for a specific program that you're going to hand off to a nonprofit and those grants would say things like, how many people do you expect to help? How many meals do you expect to serve? How many bed nights do you expect to have? And then they would have requirements if you were going to have 10 people, how many showers and toilets and things that would give some guidance then on what you're doing to remodel a building, for example, to make it suitable for a shelter. We aren't having anybody coming in saying, I would run a shelter, this would be the facility, here's what I would need help with in terms of remodeling to add 2 bathrooms or an ADA bathroom and a laundry facility or something along those lines. I don't disagree. I think an unmanaged overnight campsite is going to be a challenge. But lacking anybody stepping up to operate a managed campsite or a shelter, it's the only thing that we can do that does meet the requirements of the law and the circuit court decisions.
Yep.
And so where we could certainly have rules posted, Family Assistance Center, for example, in Sweet Home, you can't take drugs into that facility. And if you do, then you get trespassed, you're not following the rules. We could have a sign that says, don't bring drugs into the facility, but there won't be anyone there checking to make sure you're not bringing drugs into this facility. And so we're going to rely upon people following those rules. And I think, some will and some won't.
Right.
And I think we frankly have no feeling for how many people would avail themselves of an overnight sleeping location in that manner. We don't really know how many people, if there was a shelter, would avail themselves of spending nights in a shelter. So that creates a certain kind of scalability issue for us in terms of trying to guess how much space we need to offer. Certainly council can name one location, can name multiple locations, could even have a tiered, we're going to start here, and then if we have to open a second location, that would be our second choice and our third choice, for example. I agree with things the mayor said earlier, which is I think we're going to have to come back at 3 and 6 months here after we adopt this and say what's working and not working. Is this meeting police department needs to identify where people can go, and it is or it isn't, and if it isn't, what can we offer in terms of modifications to facilitate that?
Well, on that, I think if we were to name a site, I would be opposed to immediately contracting with a nonprofit to, I guess, go in and check people in, check people out. It's spending the amount of money we're talking about spending. I'd want to see how many people are actually using the site first. And if it took a 2-month or 3-month trial period, unfortunately using Public Works or police or someone just to go in and check, maybe move people out. If we're not getting anyone, then we're not getting anyone. If we're having a dozen people there a night, then that is something we'd have to look at. But I wouldn't want to commit to, yeah, we're going to name a site and we're going to pay a nonprofit $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 a year to do what? We don't actually know what they would be doing. And then I guess I'd end my comments with, I'm opposed to Berlin as a site. It's, well, what's been said tonight, a school bus stop, that's just a bad idea. And then as a firefighter in Salem, I go on multiple homeless campfires that are out of control every single day in Salem. And to have a spot out in the wildland, rural, urban interface with a steep hillside above it with houses, we're just asking for trouble. It's a bad location for people. Even though we could say there's no fires, you'd be surprised how many homeless people use fires to cook their food in July and August, regardless of what the rules are. And then I'm not a fan of the Ralston Park site, not Ralston Park, but the property next to it. From the beginning, I just felt like I think it's been said tonight, they're going to spend their day in the park. They're going to hang out at the campsite at night. It is just an invitation to stay in that area all day. And that's really not what we want to do for downtown and for the people that have businesses around there. So I need more, I guess I'd like more discussion on the time, place, and manner, what that looks like. And then as a group to decide, are we going with the site or going with the time, place, and manner? And then we can start eliminating sites if we decide to pick a site.
Just to clarify something, one nonprofit did step up and ran a sleep trailer exercise here in town over at our church, First Christian Church. We did 49 bed nights in 5 days. had no problems. We checked them in and checked them out, but that was an experimental type thing to prove that it would work. And it was tightly controlled, had video surveillance, people driving by. Frank's guys came by several times a night to make sure everything stayed calm, and it did. That's not to say that if we put a campsite somewhere else, I don't care where you put it, if it's not managed, it's just not going to work. You can't control what goes on. It'll be a nightmare for them. It'll be a nightmare for anybody around it. I don't know how many of you have done it. I went out to the Sweet Home one. And the fenced-in portion looks fine, but there was probably 24 people living on the sidewalks that can't get in, but they get free stuff from there, so they hang out. I pulled up to talk to a couple of folks, and I had 6 different people coming out of the woods with weapons, machetes, hatchets, spears, clubs, and one guy had 2 380 autos in his belt. If it's not controlled, and sometimes even if it is, you got an issue. I can't tell you the number of times outside the fence they've had to hit people with Narcan. And that's a managed place. Imagine unmanaged. For people that have not been making what you Americans would call good life choices already. We see them in the soup kitchen all the time. That soup kitchen's been going since 1989. The numbers we're seeing right now match the numbers we saw in 1989. The people are there, all the people that, and I understand, I don't want this in my neighborhood. Folks are there already. It's a matter, how do we manage that? I can appreciate the concern. I have homeless people walking up and down in front of my house all the time. Sherman Street is like a super highway. So my thought is the time, place, and manner restrictions to start with. And then revisit it in 90 days and see how that's worked. Because I think the mayor and our lawyer are correct. This is something we're going to be revisiting until he retires, because it's always something that's going to come up. We can't solve the homeless problem. We can only hope to manage it. Most of them are innocuous. They're just nuts, for lack of a better term. A lot of them have drug issues that have exacerbated their base mental health issues. But there's only probably 5 or 6 that are real problem children that we've had to throw out of the soup kitchen, that we've had to move away from places where we're at. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Did you have something, Michelle?
I think I also am willing to go down the road of time, place, and manner restrictions. You know, I do appreciate the staff's time that spent the time to go through, and we asked them to look at more locations. Clearly that happened here, and I just want to make sure that kudos gets passed along. You know, we had that meeting a month ago, and it was bumpy. We didn't know what we were going to do. And I don't know that even that this is the right answer, the time, place, and manner restrictions, but I do think taking the easiest step forward, this is probably in that realm, and I would be happy to go down that way with everybody else if that's where we're heading.
It also gives the
It's not
police
only
department.
easiest, but apparently it's the best choice for our police department right
Yeah,
now.
it gives them
Sure.
the tools they need immediately to start working on the issue.
Exactly.
And then with input from Frank and his folks, we can adjust fire as we need to. Drop 100 or add 50.
Yeah, I also visited the Sweet Home site, and KJ is absolutely right. You get up there and the inside's great. Looks like it's good living conditions, they're managing it, but just right outside the gate there, there's abandoned not abandoned because they're living in them, but motor homes. And there were some interesting characters walking around that area. I didn't see any like apparently you've seen, but they were, I almost wanted to say borderline mountain men type guys that were wearing all kinds of stuff. But anyhow, but there was a lot of population just right around that site. And I apparently they help them, but they don't really manage them. They just kind of leave them out on the end of that street there.
Yep.
I would propose the time, place, manner. However, there's one portion on there, the courtyard and lawn right here. I would be opposed to that. We have some events that go on in Lebanon. I know we're thinking about homeless. I get it. We're not heartless here, but Lebanon's really started to advance on some things and dig themselves out of a hole that we kind of been in when it comes to identity. Since the early 90s, when the timber industry kind of regressed, the identity of the city was lost for a bit. And it's starting to come back. We're starting to see these neat options for citizens or for people to go to and have fun. And that would be my only opposition, would be that portion right here. Plus it's our chambers. I think the third bullet right there kind of would take up for it because it's all public property, open to the public, minus the parks because they'd be closed at 10, but that is owned by county, state, and federal government. So that opens up a lot of other areas too. I agree with the counselors over here that taking a small step, getting where we're legal right now, where the state's not going to come down on us, and then readjust after 90 days, see what's working, and then go from there. We can research this stuff forever.
I think we have.
Yeah, we have. We have.
Point proven.
We're part-time and we work on this stuff daily. So I don't think we have all the answers. I don't think all the answers are out there yet. I think the court system is going to answer a lot of those in the next 2 years, probably. But I think if we start something small, like it's already been voiced, and move forward with that, and then see what works and what doesn't work, and evolve with the times, I guess. So
Yeah,
that's my 2 cents.
I think doing the time, place, manner, not designating, okay, these are the 4 places that you can go. Just start with that and go from there and look at it again in 90 days.
What 4 places are you thinking about?
I'm using that as a number.
And I think we were kind of in agreement in that, but what in our time, place, and manner guidelines we have right now that we need to tweak? It doesn't feel like is it just as it sits right here? I mean, it says is allowed between 6 PM and 7 AM. It seems like just kind of a,
Well, if we got rid of, if we got rid of the area over here, I'm not sure that we end up with any city-owned property other than the lawn in front of the police department. Now, like I said, there's potentially property that we don't control that's owned by other governmental entities. Am I wrong, Nancy, or is there another place that would be available?
I think that's most of what we had come up with if the time, place, and manner as it's written. So, for example, we've said, now I don't remember exactly, within 50 feet of a door into a public facility. That lets out, for example, the Maple Street side of City Hall. There are doors all along there. It would exempt the gas station, which is a public building and has a door on it. And almost all of that site is within 50 feet of that door. The lawn at the Justice Center is outside, at least part of it is outside of the 50 feet. But as you look at how those time, place, and manner restrictions are written, a lot of places do end up coming off of the list of availability. The parcel here, I think Kelly's been throwing me some concepts. We do have a lease agreement with the Albany Eastern Railroad for their use of this facility, and I think we'd have to go back, hadn't thought about that. We may have to go back and look at whether or not that lease agreement would mean that this parcel could not be used because they are entitled to the use of the train tracks and all of that for their business opportunity. They get to use this room.
is the proximity to the train tracks there not, wouldn't that rule it out?
I was just
anyway?
going to ask, what's the right of way for the train tracks? Do we know
Um,
that?
50 feet.
50 feet from
50
center
feet.
line.
So from center line 50 feet, wouldn't that be within the right of way of the
It
train track?
probably is within
Okay.
the right of way of
Then
the
that one
train
would
track,
be,
so.
come off the list.
Yeah.
I'm
apparently,
willing
so-
to bet most folks
I don't
won't
think it's-
want to go
I think there
camp
would
at
be room
Frank's
there.
place.
I don't think the 50 feet would exclude it all.
There
Just
is a
saying.
portion of the, sorry for the interruption, a portion of the courtyard that is outside of that 50-foot range.
Okay.
We had
We measured that.
measured all of that out, trying to figure out, in part because we need to make sure that time, place, and manner restrictions don't end up with, there is no place you can sleep, right? That would violate the state law and the circuit court decision. So we were trying to make sure that those restrictions that were identified were not going to.
And what, I'm probably missing something. What in here addresses parks? Is it just the hours that they can't be in,
Just
the
the
So
previous-
parks.
closed 10
so-
to,
So the,
so they could still hang out in there until 10 o'clock?
That's
And then
correct.
At least by what we have here, we'd all have to leave at 10 o'clock.
That's correct. And that's been part of the discussion that we've had. So if you recall, a couple of meetings ago, we had some people asking about lit basketball courts.
That's what I'm thinking about.
Those, we're trying to change those to LED lights, which would be way more energy efficient and would be set then on a timer to come on at dark or come on at 5 or whatever and go off at 10 PM. So that would make those basketball courts not available after 10. People talked about, they like to go out and play at 11 or midnight. That capability would go away because the park closing at 10 would be closed to everybody at 10 o'clock.
And one of the things is, for example, the location at the police station. I mean, there are cities in Oregon that are designating a spot like that as their location. In other words, the lawn next to the police department in the city and that kind of stuff. And I know we're not designating a location, and to a certain extent, we're designating a location by reverse engineering it. Because if the result is there's one place left, right? And then other governmental property.
Well, I don't have a grasp on how, luckily never been homeless. I don't know how many people are going to show up for this. I don't know how many people are going to, I don't know how many times Frank's going to have to herd somebody, or I don't know if they're going to start to know, hey, this is the place, and they're just going to organically show up there. I don't feel like that's going to happen unless it's attractive. I don't know if these are the kind of people who want to get in a group together.
You don't.
I mean,
Well,
I don't see them all ending up in one place.
And I think that's what we're trying to say earlier is let's start out that small. We're within the law and not spend a bunch of money on a designated site at this time because we just did budget. We understand that. So start out small, see what works, and either grow or retract from there, So
The other thing is it's going to depend on the time of the year as to how used it is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This
in the winter,
this
we're going
time
to
of
be
the
looking at a
year,
different thing.
folks are walking around all night long. They're out hanging with their friends, getting in trouble, whatever they're doing. Wintertime, they're going to hunker down when it gets dark because it gets cold and wet.
And I think it's fair to say that it won't be the most appealing option.
Nope.
Most likely. They will seek out some place where they don't, most likely, where they don't have to move every morning and take their stuff. Where that is, as long as, we can only regulate the property within the city limits.
And that's what they're doing now anyway.
And speaking on like outside entities or nonprofits coming in, I've had a couple meetings on that, and their first question is, why haven't you guys done this? And it's like, well, because no one's come to us with a viable plan. They've always come to us with, can you give us a building, or can you give us $500,000 or whatnot? But they don't even have a plan to, even if we had that money or a building, they still didn't have something on paper that we could look at and go, man, this looks like it might work, and then go see an example of it. It's I guess just dreams, I understand they want to help people. We all want to help people. But the bottom line is we still have to think about the rest of the community. I think we brought up the number. There's about 25 KJ that are on the street that are ones that we see every day. I know one of them, his name's Anthony. I introduced myself. He was behind Bimart at one time. And he doesn't want help. He just wants to be left alone. Actually, if they were all like him, ran a pretty clean site and was pretty responsible, but
the other
even
lady.
mowed the lawn back there at one point. I don't know where he got the lawnmower, but yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't ask. But
Trailer behind his
there's about 20 to 25. So you do the math, it's 0.001% of Lebanon's population. So I just remind the council that we have to remember that rest of that percentage, So, but I understand that we have to, as a city, have a viable plan that adheres to state, mandates and laws. And, I think, like I said earlier, I'm not going to beat a dead horse here, but I think we should just start out small, see what works, and build off of that, or we might see that it's just right.
If we don't do something, as I understand it, if we just stay the way we are, people can camp downtown in front of your place or in front of my house or whatever.
Yeah, I'm all for it.
Not necessarily, but
mean, not-
we're treating it that way to a certain extent right now out of caution.
Yeah, I mean,
If you guys didn't do anything, we'd find some things we could do.
there's always some other way, but this at least gives clarity to our police folks on how they can interact and deal with folks, and gives them a clear direction on what to do and how to deal with it.
And again, we had the one speaker that, was asking about, well, what are you doing to help find them services? What are you doing to, I want to call out, I mean, we've got a couple of resource officers at Dela and
Dave?
Dave.
Yep.
Those guys are phenomenal. And I want the people to know that, those they're full-time, right? 2 full-time people that are doing just that, trying to help them help themselves by getting them the resources they might need to end their own homelessness, right? Not giving them money, not giving them anything else, helping them figure out how to get into the Social Security office and get a check, how to get a license back, Oregon Real ID. I mean, these guys are constantly seeking to help these people, especially the ones that want to help themselves.
Yep, I know, they refer a lot of them to us.
So I just want to chime in with 3 different things. First, I just want to acknowledge the Hetherington Foundation for stepping in and being willing to even just with a solution for us. I think that was really helpful. I mean, I know it's not something we're going to do, but I just, it was the one community partner that we had kind of step up and say, hey, I'm willing to come to the table and here's a solution. So just acknowledging that. 2, when we talk about 90 days revisiting this, I really want to put some parameters on what that is that we're expecting staff to collect for us in those 90 days. Like, are we going to ask, how much staff time did you dedicate to, I don't know, managing or unmanaging the various sites, or the amount of dollars? I just want to make sure we're kind of giving them some parameters moving forward. So we know also what we're going to receive in 90 days, and then we have something in the future to kind of use as a yardstick. And then third, my question's mainly for Trey. In the time, place, manner restrictions, is the downtown core really covered? Are we completely covered with, anyone using those spots? And if not, I do have, I would like to, amend this to make sure that area is, restricted.
Yeah, and the problem with the time, place, and manner is that we would, as a staff, believe that the downtown corridor would not be available within the time, place, and manner. And Kelly, you probably know a little bit better than I do. That's my belief. I don't know if any of that is open to interpretation, and if somebody wanted to add a specific designation, adding another place specifically excluded for overnight sleeping, it certainly could. I mean, Kelly, do you think that there's any wiggle room in any of those locations?
So when thinking about the areas that we're excluding from time, place, and manner, and especially using downtown as an example, the public areas in downtown include parking lots that are owned by the city, public sidewalk areas, public rights-of-way and streets, and Strawberry Plaza. Strawberry Plaza is considered a park. So as any park, they're allowed to be there during the day, but that is excluded for overnight sleeping. In the time, place, and manner restrictions, it says all sidewalks in all city zones is excluded from sleeping to ensure that you have proper safety for ADA access. And then it also says that public parking lots that are owned by the city, including all the landscape areas surrounding that, are not open for that purpose because of the interaction of vehicles with that space. So in thinking through those areas that are available downtown, that really only from my understanding, and those who live and work downtown might have other options, but those are the only areas that I can think of that would be public space in downtown. The rest of it is private property. If a
Okay.
private property owner wanted to allow somebody
Sure.
to camp, that's their choice. But public-wise, there's a clear reason why those would be restricted, and that would cover the downtown from my understanding.
Okay. Well, I was mainly just asking that question because I know myself and other counselors did receive that, I think is like 37-page petition from a local business with various Lebanon signatures to asking us not to put something downtown. I mean, that was a pretty Herculean effort to get that many signatures. So that precipitates the question that I asked today. So with that, I'm no further questions.
I think my final question would be, I think I've said my final question twice already, but because the audience tonight, they don't have the draft of the time, place, and manner restrictions in front of them, I'm going to try and summarize it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. That actually, maybe I'm going to let you summarize it in like 2 sentences. My guess would be we're keeping things as is. We're giving the police the ability to enforce no sleeping in the parks, no sleeping in sidewalks. And it, according to what Kelly just said, it removes the option for sleeping in the downtown area.
Mostly, yes.
Okay.
I think you said it keeps what we have. I think it tightens what we have.
Okay.
So we have, on time, we have said that in inclement weather, the police chief or the city manager can override some of these issues for some, person's medical disability or something along those lines. But it's really the place issues where we have said it's not sidewalks or curb strips abutting any property, because those are all public. Within 1,000 feet of a school, a youth club, or an organization used for the benefit of children in the community. It's not any of the city, within 50 feet of city-maintained trail or multi-use path. And so that would mean like the Hat Irvine and those kinds of trails would remain clear. Edge of water and 50 feet above high water mark. So trying to stay out of riparian areas, away from creeks and rivers. That becomes a critical issue. Within 50 feet of any entrance to any city-owned building or structure. That's just to make sure people can access those city facilities when they need to. We have some limits on what you can do in terms of the structures that you build. So you can't, for example, tie a tarp to a door handle and then put it over yourself. You can't attach it to the building. You can't put tent pegs in ground. We end up having to replace a lot of irrigation systems because of that. You've got to leave any ability pathways kind of stuff. So we do have some limitations that way. Not a vehicle lane, a bike lane, a roundabout, should we ever get one. And then not in any, as Kelly said, city-owned parking lots or the landscape strips around them. So that's all downtown. And then any place that the fire chief or fire marshal would say they had concern for fire danger. That one is really kind of modeled on things Medford has done where their Big Creek area, which is heavily used by homeless people, this time of year, all of those camps get cleaned out because of fire danger. And we want to make sure if the fire chief that said they had concerns, we were able to address that timely and not have to come back to council and modify the code for that. Again, in terms of the manner restrictions, you've got to have things that are freestanding, basically. Again, you can't attach it to buildings, to signposts. We don't want to be blocking vision triangles, kinds of things. You can't accumulate stuff. You can't leave garbage behind. So if we have an overnight location, somebody is sleeping there, we roust them in the morning and say, it's time for you to move on. They have to pack all of their stuff and either goes into the garbage receptacle, or it goes on the bike trailer, or in your backpack, or back in your car, to take with you, that we're not leaving big messes behind. If they are, we assume that that's abandoned property and we can dispose of it as abandoned property, not this is your stuff you're coming back to. So I think there are some restrictions in those time, place, and manner restrictions that are much tighter than what currently exists, right? We don't have those rules today.
I agree, yeah. Yeah.
Is there, just because I might have missed it, is there something in those time, place, and manner that rule out this Berlin Road place that I missed? Is that something, if all of a sudden people just show up there, what's the premise?
So the Berlin Road site would be a public right-of-way.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
And that would not be available. I will say, we currently have, and there are people camping in riparian areas now. They camp mostly year-round down along the river, both sides, both the Lebanon side and the east side of the river. That's been some of the concern about fire danger. It was the fire that the district was out on 2 days ago. The one last night was on the old Warehouser Mill site, and I spoke with the owner of that property today, and they will be clearing all of the underbrush out to minimize fire danger, and we're talking about some other alternatives to pursue to make sure that that site remains as fire-free as we can. It's so close to homes, it becomes quite concerning with I think the fire chief said about 6 acres burned yesterday, and they were out all day putting water on that site to make sure it didn't flare up. So those are serious concerns, and as it gets hotter and drier, they become more critical.
So I was talking earlier and about the space here. And, if we put a amendment in that document of 100 feet from an active railroad, I don't think we should put people in tents by an active railroad, in my opinion. So if we put that amendment in there, prevent that. But that's, like I said, that's up to the council here, but that's another 20 cents. That's 20 cents of information.
If we do that, are we within 100 feet of the railroad by the Justice Center? Are we then leaving no?
I'm gonna let Kelly look that up and
It's-
measure it, because she will get there like in 30 seconds flat. And-
Wow,
No pressure.
Doo-doo-doo.
Sorry to throw a wrench. I just want to make sure
No.
we're
Well,
not
if it's
excluding
50
every
feet from
single
a door,
site
a
in
public door,
this
there's a public
city.
door right here.
Yeah.
Doesn't that take 50 feet this
But-
way and
but if you
50
go-
feet from the
If you
railroad
go
track?
50 feet out.
There's still a
you
little
still have-
triangle.
You
Still a
still
little
have a
bit
pretty fair chunk of
I
that
got you.
concrete area out in front that is available, because we did measure from 50 feet.
I got you.
out.
And I know people will say, oh my God, they're putting all these guidelines on it.
Thank you, Kelly.
But if you look at that, it's still other public property open to the public that's owned by county, state, or federal. So there's, I don't think we're narrowing the scope that much with that clause in there. So
But it's reasonable too, because in Salem, of all, many dozens of train versus pedestrians I've had over the last 20 years, I'm just going to throw a random number. It's probably 95% homeless people that have been run over by trains because they use the tracks to travel and they fall asleep on the tracks. It's just not a good spot.
So 100 feet would leave area outside the Justice Center. 100 feet from center line would leave the area outs, would the area next to the police station would still qualify.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that we weren't setting ourselves up, so.
And it's actually, that will help as well, because if you take the distance from the railroad, it takes you 10 feet past the exit that the police officers would use to go in and out, so it's
Oh, that's
perfect.
better even. Okay, thank you.
Are you saying that the Burnell property is next to a railroad track?
It is
That's
next
right
to a
next.
railroad track.
That would automatically exclude it, right?
It would be excluded on the basis that it's a street, so it's a
Yeah.
public right-of-way.
Yeah,
Got
under,
two strikes.
But I guess I don't understand what you're saying.
That
So-
wouldn't be one of the options for the time, place, and manner.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it is on a right of way, and the other one would be it's close to the road. So that wouldn't be, Burdell Boulevard would not be an option for someone to go sleep if they got removed from the park at night.
exactly.
Okay.
It would have to be designated. So on the bullet statement here, it says a TPM restrictions would not allow for sleeping/protection from elements on public right of ways for that street. So
So it would eliminate the property on Grant Street?
The Heatherington,
It's a private one, so.
that's private.
Private, so it wouldn't
So-
count.
Wouldn't count. So we could designate that as a place to go.
Good.
It's not in a condition to do that right now.
No.
no, it would require clearing and I assume some amount of leveling. I never really know what's under a pile of blackberries. So it would require clearing and leveling and some kind of fill. It would, and until we got it cleared, we wouldn't know for sure. So it would certainly not be available on July 1st.
And then by just what happened the last couple of days, that group might be rethinking that maybe? Did he mention that when you talked to him?
No, he was not rethinking that today. He was recognizing that that site probably needs a similar cleanup to what's happening on the larger chunk of the Weyerhaeuser parcel.
Yeah.
Because of all of the overgrown undergrowth, and that makes it a fire danger. And I believe he wants to be a really good neighbor and be fire safe. So I think he's looking
Well,
very
yeah.
much at the need to add in cleaning up that site.
Okay. Like I said, it'd be earlier twice now. This would be the third time. Start small.
Yep.
So
I agree. I think that time, place, and manner restrictions are a reasonable first step that gives the police the ability to enforce no camping in the parks, no sleeping on the sidewalks, keeps us legal. And like Michelle, I also want to, in 90 days, I think I'd want information from the police and the public if if this has created a problem somewhere that we didn't anticipate.
Exactly.
I'd like to
Yeah.
hear about it
Yeah.
because that's what's going to guide our decision-making moving forward is, can we put these time, place, and manner restrictions in place? Did it force these people to a spot we didn't anticipate? And if so, I want to be able to deal with it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I don't know how to set, I don't know how to set measurables for them, though. It's, I hate to say complaint-based, but it's going to be what it causes Frank to do and where these people end up.
It is,
I
yeah.
don't know how to put a bar to it that you have to.
I think it's also going to include staff time for Public Works, who's going to have to clean, identify and possibly clean up areas. I mean, someone's going to, wherever they may be, because it might not
Well,
just
how do we
be-
measure that against what they'd already have to do? if we pick
I
the
don't know.
spot?
I want to make sure that we're just being as comprehensive as we can when we move forward with this. So we have some data to actually evaluate when we come back in 90 days and we're just not like, yep, looks good, I mean, what looks good, so.
Eat the apple
yeah.
one bite at a time.
So I'm going to say that would be the October 11th meeting, saying that so we can make sure we get it booked in and planned for that agenda. I would ask whether you would want that designated as a public hearing and we would do a press release and invite people to come in and make comments, or if you wanted us to pull those comments in advance for whatever has come in through calls to police or public works or whatever, for staff to track. And we certainly will start tracking what we get in terms of calls for cleanup, for sites of concern, those kinds of issues. So
I think for consistency, we'd want it to be a public hearing, unless I'm wrong there. We've listened to people this far.
My only hesitation on that, and it's not the public hearing piece, it's just that I hope that they're not feeling they got to wait till October, show up next month if this doesn't go very well, come back, tell us what's not working and that would be my only hesitation.
There
but
will
I'd
be some
leave it to the
unintended
mayor.
consequences.
Oh,
Sure,
I have no doubt.
absolutely.
We don't know what they are, so.
Excuse me.
I don't think it necessarily, needs a public hearing because I know the public will come at all our council meetings up until that point and voice their concerns. But I will defer to people who've been on the council a lot longer than I have on that.
It's going to be public anyway when we have it here.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
our regular session, and we let people know.
And they're
we're
going to
gonna
speak
have it.
during the public comment
Yeah,
section at the
I
beginning.
don't know that we need to have at this point, a separate work session like we're doing now, just strictly for this one subject.
I would just be, cognizant, personally, I'd be cognizant of the agenda and making sure that it's not a very long and chewy agenda if we also have that on there for revisiting.
Well, I hate to
possibly
second
this.
guess myself, but it might have a benefit to have a focused work session before we had a hearing so that we'd seen the data and would be able to respond to people better.
I mean, I anticipate that you're going to get monthly updates as well. I mean, you know, I'm sure this is going to be part of Nancy's manager meeting. Certainly Frank's at most of these meetings. He can tell you, there's no reason not to tell you how it's going on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Yep, can do.
So with all that being said,
I think we need to address Trey's little concern about his definition that he asked us to look at.
Yeah, I'm not sure I call it a little concern. I mean, this is the lawyer.
A
It must be a
giant
major
concern by our
concern.
legal representative over here to
Well,
lengthen
as I'm looking at it, from what I've heard, there's 3 potential amendments. There is the amendment to the definition, changing it from 24 hours to whatever somebody wants to make the motion to. There was the potential amendment by Councilor Steinhabel regarding the downtown area and whether we wanted to specifically call that out as an excluded area in the place provisions. And then there's also the amendment that would add a provision in the place restrictions that would would prohibit any overnight sleeping within 100 feet of the center line of an active railroad.
I did request, I reached out to Trey earlier to ask for an amendment for the downtown core to keep that a restricted area, but based on staff input in tonight, I don't think that that needs to be inserted in today's ordinance, so. You can take that number 2 off.
So for your giant concern about the camping time, 72 hours makes more sense because that.
It gives you more than just a weekend, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm fine with 72. Like I said, I've seen 72 and I've seen 5 days. I haven't seen anything over 5 days.
I move that we amend it to 72 hours for an
We need
established camp.
we need the actual ordinance
Do
first.
we need, can we do that, or do we need to read
You
it
can do
first?
it. I think you could amend it.
Yeah.
I think it's more,
Amend it before it's read?
yeah.
Okay,
Because then otherwise, when they amend it, then the person who moved it originally would have to agree to
Amend
the
it.
amendment.
Thank you, Robert.
sorry.
So, okay, so a motion for 72 hours.
I second.
a motion's been made to increase to 72 hours. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion for 72 hours has been passed.
And just for clarity's sake and for the recorder, that's the changing the word 24 to 72 in the definition of established camping site under 12.14.010 definitions.
And I'd make a motion to amend the time, place, and manner restrictions to include restricting camping within 100 feet from any railroad right-of-way.
Second.
The center line of railroad right-of-way?
Yeah, I mean, the right-of-way itself is 50 feet.
So within any center line of any railroad?
Yeah,
Okay.
center line of a railroad.
You got that.
That extends it another 50 feet.
I'll try and say it
down.
again.
Actually, I took the liberty of drafting something if
Oh,
you'd
did you?
like it.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that.
Okay, so Counselor would move to amend the section of the provision on 12.14.030, designated sleeping area and overnight sleeping area. Subsection B, overnight sleeping areas. Subsection 2A, the place, to add provision 11, which will state within 100 feet of the center line of any active railroad.
That's my motion.
Well said.
I still second it.
Thank you.
Motion's been made. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion has passed.
And now when anybody chooses to make the motion to approve the ordinance, just please say move to approve as amended.
Move to approve is amended.
Second.
But do you have to read the ordinance?
Oh, yeah.
No, now he has to read
See,
it.
now I'm getting ahead of myself. I can get back to it. I was working in my Word version. Cheat sheet.
Computers are our friends.
There we go. All right. Ordinance Bill number 2023-12, ordinance number 3007, a bill for an ordinance repealing and replacing Lebanon Municipal Codes, chapters 12.12, Parks and Public Places, and 12.14, Park Hours and Park Closure.
Move for approval with amendments.
Second.
Motion's been made to approve. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion has passed. So, any other business?
Thank you, Trey, for keeping us in line.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
actually, I may have to do something here. Just give me
Oh,
one
no.
second. It was something that I had meant to change, and I want to make sure I put it in there. Did I put an emergency clause in there?
No, I was wondering if
Need
it's
to
effective
declare an
immediately.
emergency to make it effective immediately upon passage, and you can do that by motion.
I move to declare the previously approved ordinance effective, an emergency effective immediately.
Second.
Motion's been made. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion has been passed. Any other comments from council or staff?
I would say thank you, staff, for
It is in there.
doing all the work. Michelle said this earlier, but I know you guys worked hard finding those other sites and making the modifications for the time, place, and manner restrictions.
I second
So
that.
thank you all.
I would like to thank the public for coming and letting us hear your voice, because it's important to listen to you. We work for you, so.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, let me adjourn the meeting here. So, meeting is adjourned at 7:45.